was probably still there. But the death incident was, he was shot by a shotgun in the chest. A shotgun has many bullets. So they got the autopsy report from that village of that person who died, and that's actually a police autopsy report with the bullet hole wounds there, and with one big one in the middle. So that was previous lifetime. In this lifetime, when the child was born, he had these marks on his chest. And there's still a little bit visible there, with one big hole in the middle. So somehow, it's not related genetically, so it's not hereditary or anything. These two families not related at all. But the impression at his death with the wound got stuck into his new body. The impression of his old body stuck into the new body like this. So this is kind of surprising how that happens. Then he discovered that so many children are like that. So this is someone born in this life with no fingers. And what does it look like? It looks like somebody chopped off their fingers. And there's no genetic reason for that either, for why there's no fingers, but no fingers. And it comes, the point is that this child remembers previous lifetime. They were playing on the farm, and they were playing there, and they got their fingers cut off by this sharp, instrument, saw or something like that. And that's how they died. So previous lifetime, their ending impression was, I have no fingers. This has happened next lifetime. No fingers, like that. Is from Turkey, boy from Turkey. He has no ear for some reason. And he's got a big scar up here, born like that. Previous lifetime, he remembers, he was shot in the head. Ear was blown off. So this life, no ear. And so the previous life, memory imprinted this life. So that kind of is another proof, kind of, that this idea of Bhagavad Gita, that what did you think of when you die, you attain that in your next lifetime. The mental impression carries over, does something to your next body. Very powerful. So he was actually very convinced that we were going from body to body, etc. So in this way, his work gives us some sort of proof from a scientist that yes, we go from body to body. We carry over our impressions also. The fault, of course, is that it's testimony. It's not like science with microscopes and stuff like that, repeatable experiments, no. It is testimony of small children, that's all. But as far as his work, as he was very methodical, interviewing them properly, and not prejudicing and asking questions this way and that way, whatever. And so as far as testimony is concerned, it's some sort of evidence, if not scientific evidence, it's testimonial evidence only, but some sort of interesting proof. Another area is near-death experience. This is quite, in the 1980s when this first started, it was not so common. Now it's very common. People have recollected their experiences on YouTube. You go on YouTube, look up, there's all sorts of people recalling their death experience. So near-death experience is a state when you're supposedly dead and your brain, no brain waves are coming out, the heart is not beating anymore. And then suddenly you come back to life. It may be 15 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, or maybe an hour. Sometimes it's a few days. Somebody's in the morgue and they wake up and they have to bring them out because they're supposed to be dead. So now, of course, just how they come back to life when they're supposed to be dead, that's also difficult to explain by science, because technically when your brain is dead for, I think, a certain number of minutes, it's finished, and it's not though you can't revive, but these people do come back to life anyway. That's one thing, but the important point is when they are dead, they experience things. But that's also impossible because your brain is dead. So how can you have any experience? Not only experience, they see things and they hear things. But your senses aren't operating because your brain is dead. How can it happen? And furthermore, they hear things and see things which are actually true when they're dead. So they can hear the doctor speaking or the nurse speaking, or they can describe operations of what they're doing, trying to revive them, and cutting here, cutting there, doing this and whatever. So they're sometimes very accurate information when they're supposed to be dead. How is it possible? Huh? So, some scientists, doctors, I think especially the doctors, because the patients come to the doctor and say, well, I had this strange experience, what is it? The doctors don't know either. They can't explain it. So some doctors got a little curious, what is this? So they began interviewing different people. Again, it's based on testimony. So all the people that had such experiences, they interviewed. And then they discovered that something very interesting. The experiences are all very similar. They came from different religions, different ages, different backgrounds, different nationalities, and whatever. But they had very similar experiences. So how to explain that when they're all dead and whatever? So what is the experience? It's supposed to be dead, and they can perceive themselves leaving their body, even though they don't have the eyes anymore, and somehow they can perceive, I'm still alive, they think they're alive, but my body's down there, but I'm looking at the body. So they separate from the body, and they can perceive that. If they have prolonged experience, then they start going through a tunnel, long tunnel, with a light at the end, through the tunnel. And then they come out on the other end. And then they think, oh, I'm in heaven now. It's all light and beautiful, and there's no pain, feeling of peace, whatever, very wonderful. So you usually think, I'm in heaven now, I'm dead and finished, whatever. If the experience goes further, then they will meet people, but not like us. These people are like, ethereal or something, They're there, and they're persons, they may be even dead relatives, and they also speak. But they don't speak through language, they speak through the mind, and they're communicating with the mind, so it doesn't matter about language, which language it is. And they also get a life review. So all of the events of their life from birth onwards they can see, getting born, small child, 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, all the way up until the death. They get a whole life review. So these are like common things that they experience, which is also difficult to explain why they all have similar experiences. Some skeptics will say, well, okay, some chemicals in the brain are doing this, or because they have anesthesia, this is causing hallucinations. Of course, you can have hallucinations when your brain is dead. I don't know how that may explain that. Brain is not operating, so how you can have hallucinations, but it's not the influence of, anesthesia or something like this, but they're all getting different anesthesias, so why would they all get the same experience? So many things are difficult to explain in terms of this common experience. So those researchers, of course, said, well, look, it looks like we're not the body. We don't die. We're in the body, and we go out of the body. And then in this case, they come back to the body again. So this was their conclusion. After having a near-death experience, people believe end of life does not exist because they're outside the body and they're still alive. They're a person. They believe in some sort of life after death. The death vanishes for them. There's only life. So several doctors began experimenting. These are just two of the doctors. And this Dr. Moody says, from my near-death research and my personal experience, death is, in my judgment, simply a transition to another kind of reality. So you don't die, actually. So you're something else beyond the body. So same conclusion as Dr. Ian Stevenson with the reincarnation investigation. So again, it's based on testimony. But doctors are doing this, and they also were not religious when they started out, but afterwards they believed in the soul. In the Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter, there's also a very interesting observation. When the soul accepts or leaves the body, he takes these senses with him in the subtle body. So how can you see when you're dead? Because you got senses in your subtle body. That's what this verse is saying in Bhagavad Gita. Yeah? So when you die, your gross body doesn't function, but your subtle body does function. And it can leave this body or it can come back to the body. Yeah? So that's a good explanation for these near-death experience. The soul is there, but it has the subtle body with